Assalamu alaikum. This is Deliverance from Error, a reading from the book by Abu Hamid Al Ghazali-Rahimahullah. May Allah have mercy on his soul. Today, we will be completing the part 3, where I will be talking, I will be reading from the beginning of chapter 2, the categories of seekers. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. When God, the Almighty, had cured me of this disease through His mercy and immense goodness, I perceived that the categories of those who seek truth are divided into 4 groups. The first one, the scholastics or mutakallimun, who claim discernment and speculative capabilities. The second one, the interiorists or Bainiya, who claim to be the masters of teaching, ta'lim, and are characterized by the belief in the need for an infallible imam. The third one are the philosophers, falasifa, who consider themselves exponents of logic and proof. And the fourth one are the mystics or Safiya, who seek the privilege of divine presence, Ahl al-Hadra, vision and inspiration. I said then to myself, truth does not escape these 4 groups of seekers, for they follow the path which leads thereto. Were truths to elude them, there would be no hope of even finding it, especially not by conformism. The conformist is excluded from the beginning, for he could succeed in finding the truth only by realizing that he is deceived in being a conformist. Then his glass shield would shatter. The pieces could never be reassembled, but would have to be melted down and recast once again as a new form. I soon set myself to follow these 4 paths and to examine what these groups hold, beginning with the mutakallimun, the scholasticism, passing through philosophy and interiorism, and finishing with the mysticism of the Sufis. Now, in the part 1, it is the science of kalam. Its aim and achievements. I began with the study of scholasticism and studied it thoroughly. I read the books written by its well-established scholars and wrote some myself. I discovered it to be a science that served its own purposes, which however were not mine. Its only purpose is to preserve the creed of the orthodox faith, the Sunni faith, and to protect it against the confusion brought by innovators. God transmitted to His people by the voice of His prophet a creed which is the true faith concerning both this world and the hereafter, as is stated in the Quran and the traditions, the Sunnah. Then through the ideas of the innovators, the devil introduced heresies contrary to the tradition, the Sunnah. Vigorously quoting them, the innovators were on the point of corrupting the true creed for its adherents. That is when God raised up the scholastics to defend the tradition by a series of well-worded discourses which revealed the heresies which had been mischievously innovated. This is the origin of scholasticism and its teachers. Some have carried out their task honestly. They have defended the tradition, repulsed the attacks on the faith of the Prophet, and fought against religious innovations. But in doing this, they used arguments borrowed in spirit of concession from their adversaries. They accepted this either uncritically or based on the consensus of the Muslim nation, or by too simply accepting a supposed meaning of the Quran and tradition. Most often, their argument was restricted to revealing the contradictions in the opposing view and to attacking their conclusions from their premises. This was not of great use to anyone who does not concede anything beyond the basic certainties. For myself, scholasticism brought little satisfaction and could not cure the sickness from which I suffered. It is true that after a long time, the advocates of Kalam wished to defend the tradition by searching deeply into the nature of things. They have undertaken research into substances, accidents, and natural laws. But since the purpose of their science lay elsewhere, what they said fell short of its goal. Due to the differences of opinion, the result has not helped to dissipate the dark confusion due to the differences of opinion among persons. I do not doubt that others have had a better experience than I, perhaps even a whole category of persons. But for them this was mixed with a blind acceptance of questions which have nothing to do with basic principles. My present goal is to reveal the state of my soul, not in order to blame those who have sought a remedy in scholasticism, for healing medicines vary according to the disease. Those which benefit some patients will harm others. Part 2. Philosophy. On the essence of philosophy, what is blameworthy in it and what is not? What makes its patron an unbeliever and what does not? What makes one an innovator or heretic and what does not? What philosophers have plagiarized from the works of the people of truth and incorporated this into their writings in order to propagate their own falsehoods together with those truths? How do souls come to refrain from truth and how to distinguish unadulterated truth from the falsehood and deceptions found in the philosophers' teachings? Having finished with scholasticism, I passed over to philosophy, al-Falasifa. I knew very well that it is impossible to detect the distortions in a branch of knowledge without a deep understanding of it, rivaling those most knowledgeable in that subject. One must even outstrip them to sound the depths and explore the perils which its teachers had ignored. Only in this way may one hope to expose its weak points. But I do not know any Muslim scholar who has taken up this approach. The books of the scholastics, insofar as they were concerned to respond to the philosophers, contain nothing but obscure and sparse allusions. They have evident contradictions and errors, and do not seem capable of convincing a person of average intelligence, let alone one familiar with the subtleties of the science. I have learned that to attempt to refute a system without understanding it or knowing it through and through, it is to do so blindfold. Therefore, I set myself to a serious study of this science of philosophy through its written works, reading them without the help of a teacher. I did this during leisure moments while working on the composition and teaching of religious law. At this time in Baghdad, I had 300 pupils to teach and instruct. Thank God, reading alone in these stolen moments allowed me to understand the deep secrets of philosophy in less than 2 years. I continued after this to reflect upon the subject for nearly a year, returning to it, taking it up again, and re-examining its depths and its hidden dangers. Finally, I was in a position to sum up with great certainty what it contained of heresy and of both practical and abstract delusions. Here is my expose of the philosophers and the results of their sciences. There are many categories of philosophers and many branches of philosophy, but throughout their numerous schools they suffer from the defect of being infidels and irreligious, though among the different groups of philosophers the older seem less distant from the truth than do the others. A. The categories of philosophers and their atheism. Considering their main groups and their different theories, the philosophers can be divided into 3 categories: materialists, naturalist, and theist. 1. The materialist, Zahiriyan. The oldest group denies the existence of the Creator, ruler, omniscient, and omnipotent, maintaining that the universe always has existed by itself without a maker. According to them, the animal issued from the sperm and the sperm from the animal continuously. These are the atheist, the Zindika. 2. Number 2, the naturalists, the Biyan. They have carried out much research into the natural world and the wonders of the animal and vegetable kingdom. They have advanced the anatomical study of animal organisms, what they have seen of the wonders of creation, the works of divine wisdom, has obliged them to acknowledge a wise creator, knowledgeable about things and their ends. It is not possible to study anatomy and the marvelous functioning of the organs without perceiving the necessary perfection of Him who formed the body of the animal, or above all that of human beings. Nevertheless, the naturalists have concluded on the basis of their research that the balance of one's humors has a great influence on one's physical constitution. They believed further that the faculty of reasoning depended on this, to the extent that the faculty would disappear without this balance, and it seemed inconceivable to them that once it ceased to exist, it could be reborn. Hence, they held that the human soul dies and does not return to life. They denied the last things, paradise and hell, resurrection and judgment. The reward for good behavior and the punishment of the bad becomes pointless. Unchecked, these naturalists have plunged like animals into lechery. They are also atheists, since faith has to be in God and the day of judgment. Whereas even if the naturalists believed in God and His attributes, they have denied the existence of the last judgment. 3. The theists, Elahian, are the most recent. Among them were Socrates, the teacher of Plato, the teacher of Aristotle. Aristotle put them on a logical footing, systematized the philosophical sciences, developed them, and brought their fruit to maturity. In general, the theists refuted the pretensions of the materialists and naturalists, and by exposing their shameful errors, saved others the task. In this way, God saved the believers the trouble of combating such errors. At great length and sparing no effort, Aristotle refuted the allegations of Plato, Socrates, and those theists who preceded them. He distanced himself from them, although he could not avoid preserving traces of their ugly heresies and innovations. They all should be regarded as heretics, as should their successors. Such Muslim philosophers as Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi and their like, more than any, these two contributed to the spread of Aristotle's ideas. The errors and confusions in the work of the other philosophers have so troubled their leaders as to appear unintelligible. But how can one reject or accept something that one does not understand? Aristotle's authentic philosophy, if we keep to what Al-Farabi and Avicenna transmitted to us, consisted of 3 parts. The first 2 would be condemned, one for disbelief, the other for innovation or heresy, the third would not be condemned without appeal. B. The divisions of the philosophical sciences. The sciences that concern the philosophers in relation to our aim are divided into 6 categories: mathematics, logic, the natural sciences, metaphysics, politics, and ethics. Number 1. Mathematics. This deals with arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy, but nothing in them relates positively or negatively to religious matters. Mathematics treats demonstrable matters which in no way can be denied once they are known and understood. However, this presents 2 risks. The first risk from studying mathematics is that the student is struck by the precision of the science and the imposing power of his proofs. He extends this high esteem to all the philosophical disciplines and attempts to generalize the clarity and firmness had by mathematical proofs. Then when he hears mathematicians being reproached as heretics for having negative attitudes or for being scornful of revelation, he rejects the truth which he had admitted previously through pure conformism. If faith were true, he will say to himself, how is it that these mathematical experts have not perceived it? As people say that they are heretics and irreligious, truth must consist in rejecting and denying religious beliefs. How many people have lost their faith because of this simple argument? The answer is that each technician is a specialist. The lawyer or scholastic is not necessarily a good physician, or one who is ignorant of metaphysics is not necessarily ignorant of grammar. Every technique has its unrivaled experts who are ignorant and stupid in other fields. The mathematics of the ancients was founded on proofs. Their study of divinity was founded on speculation. But this can be known only to an experienced person who has made a thorough investigation of the matter. Unfortunately, these considerations escape those whose faith is only a matter of conformism. They persist in having a good opinion of all the philosophical disciplines, driven as they are by vain passions, destructive irony, and the desire to appear clever. As the risk is considerable, it is fitting to warn regarding mathematics, although it has no connection with religion. It provides the basis for the other sciences. Anyone who studies it risks infection by their vices. Few who study it escape the danger of loss of faith. The second risk comes from the ignorant, if faithful, Muslim. Imagining that one should defend one's faith by rejecting all philosophy, such a one rejects all the sciences, going so far as to deny the scientific explanations for eclipses of the sun or the moon, claiming that they contradict Islam. If this reaches the ears of someone who has learned about necessary truths, he will not begin to doubt the scientific explanation, but will doubt the basis of Islam, believing it to be founded upon ignorance and a denial of truth. This can do nothing but consolidate a person's love for philosophy and hatred of Islam. People who imagine that they are defending Islam when they reject the philosophical sciences are really doing great harm to Islam. It assumes neither a positive nor a negative attitude to such sciences, which in no way are opposed to religion. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has said, "The sun and the moon are two of the divine signs. They are eclipsed neither for the death nor for the birth of anyone. When you see an eclipse, you should have recourse to praise of God and prayer." Whether in these words is there mention of any rejection of arithmetic, which calculates in a particular way of the path of the sun and the moon, their conjunction and their opposition. As for the Prophet saying, "But when God reveals himself to something, it humbles itself before him," this addition is not found in the authenticated collections of hadith. Those are the two risks which mathematics can present. Number 2, the logic. This has nothing to do with the faith, which it neither approves nor disavows. It is restricted to an examination of methods of demonstration, syllogisms, and reasoning by analogy, to the conditions of the premises of proof and the modes of their combination, and to the conditions of exact definition and how it is to be drawn up. Logic is concerned solely with the concept, which is a question of definition, and with judging the truth of something, which is a question of proof. There is nothing in that which should be rejected. Scholastic and speculative scholars already have made use of it. The logicians differ from them only in their vocabulary, their terminology, their definitions, and their more profound classifications. Here is an example of their reasoning. If one admits that all A is B, it must follow that some B is also A. In other words, if it is true that all men are animals, it must follow that some animals are men. This is what they mean when they say that a universal truth is the reverse of a partial truth. What connections is there between such logic and religious questions, which would require one to reject or condemn it? If you condemned it, you would gain a poor reputation among the logicians. First for your own poor mind, but above all for the religion which you claim to be founded apparently on this denial. It is true that there is some injustice on the part of logicians. They wish to accumulate for their proofs conditions they know to be capable of giving rising to infallible certainty, about which there can be no doubt. But when they take up questions of religion, they cannot realize these conditions and do not follow their own principles. Thus, someone who admires logic will imagine that the blasphemies attributed to the philosophers are based on seemingly solid proofs, and quickly will opt for a heresy before even having studied theodicy. Thus, logic too is not without risks. The third, natural sciences. These deal with the heavens and the stars, as well as with such simple bodies below as water, air, earth, fire, and such organic bodies as animals, vegetables, and minerals. They examine also the causes of their change, transformations and mixtures. They proceed like medicine in its study of the anatomy of the parts of the body and the causes of the mixing of humors. It is no more necessary for religion to reject the natural sciences than the sciences of medicine, except for a few points mentioned in our book on the incoherence of the philosophers, Tahafat al-Falasifa. The other points of disagreement are subsumed in this. The basic theme of these natural sciences is to recognize that all nature is in the service of the all-powerful. Nature does not act by of itself, but it is used in the service of the Creator. It is thus that the sun, the moon, the stars and the elements are subject to God's command. Nothing in them is able to act independently by and of itself. Number 4. Metaphysics. This contains most of the philosophers' errors because these scholars are not able to furnish the proofs which their logic requires. They contradict each other in this domain. On this point, Aristotle's theory is close to that of Muslims as regards what is transmitted by Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina. But the sum of their errors amounts to 20 basic articles, all of which would excommunicate the philosophers. 3 count as heresy and the other 17 as innovations. To refute these 20 errors, I wrote Al-Tahfatul, the incoherence of the philosophers. Here, to start with, are the 3 main heresies which have excommunicated their holders from Islam. A. They hold that at the last judgment, human bodies will not be reassembled, but the souls alone will be rewarded or punished. They also say that the rewards and punishments will be spiritual and not physical. They are right to insist on the spiritual rewards and punishments, which in itself is certain, but they are wrong to deny the physical rewards and punishments. This is a sheer denial of the revealed law. B. They also believe that God knows the universal, but not the particular, which is also a proper heresy. What is correct is that in heaven as on earth, not an atom escapes His knowledge. C. They affirm further the pre-existence of the universe and its eternity, something that no Muslim has ever believed. On other questions, such as the denial of the attributes of God and maintaining that God knows through His essence rather than by knowledge added thereto, and similar ideas. Their doctrine is close to the theories of the Mutazilites, but they should not be considered heretical on the basis of such views. In my work, The Clear Criterion for Distinguishing Between Islam and Godlessness, I mentioned that as well as the error of those who are quick to condemn as heresy anything not of their own system. 5. Politics. On the whole, politics concern the management of temporal government and the authority of rulers. It has taken its maxims from the books revealed by God to the prophets and the maxims of the ancient prophets. Number 6. Ethics. The object of the science of ethics comes down to the study of the qualities of the soul and of character. The different categories and the way to cultivate and direct them, the moralists took the doctrine for the mystics, the Sufis. These are holy men who devote themselves to calling upon God, the Almighty, to struggling against the passions and to following the divine path while separating themselves from the good things of the world. In their spiritual states, human nature and its faults and vices have been revealed to them. They have explained this clearly. The philosophers took over what the mystics said and incorporated it into their own teaching in order to spread the errors under the bright luster of the mystics. In their time, as always, there was one of those groups which God never leaves the world without, for they are the pillars which support the earth. God's mercy descends upon it because of their spirit, in accordance with Muhammad's saying, peace be upon him, "It is by them that the rain and your subsistence comes to you." The sleepers in the cave were of such persons. According to the Quran, there were such persons in ancient times. C. The dangers of philosophy. The philosophers have incorporated in their writings the sayings of the prophets and the maxims of the mystics. From this there has arisen a double risk, both for the one who accepts their teachings and for the one who rejects them. 1. The danger of rejecting philosophy is considerable. Some weak spirits have believed that they should reject the words of the prophets and mystics because these are found among erroneous statements in the writings of the philosophers. They even thought they should not cite these as extracted from the philosophers because to their weak minds such sayings would be false because uttered by those in error. This attitude is like that of people who criticize Christians for saying there is no God but God and Jesus is the messenger of God. They say that it is what the Christians say without stopping to think whether the Christian is an unbeliever because of this saying or because of his denial of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet, peace be upon him. If one is an unbeliever only because of what he denies, he should not be opposed in anything other than what he denies and of the things which are inherently true, even though the Christian also holds it to be such. That is the mistake made by people of weak minds. They do not recognize the truth except in the mouth of certain people, instead of recognizing people when they speak the truth. On the contrary, a wise man follows the advice of the commander of believers, Ali ibn Abu Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, who said, "Do not recognize the truth in the mouth of certain men, but first recognize the truth and then you will recognize who are truthful." And initiate, a wise man begins by recognizing what is true and after that examines individual things. If one of these is truthful, he accepts it, whether the person who said it is in error or in truth. A wise person may even attempt to isolate the part of the truth which is contained in the statements of mistakenly people. He is well aware that the grains of gold are hidden in the sand and that the experienced money changer takes no risk in hunting through a forger's money bag in order to separate the pure gold from the false coins. Of course, one would not allow a rustic deal with a forger. One keeps the fool away from the riverbank, but not the expert swimmer. One forbids the child to touch the snake, but there is no danger for the snake charmer. Alas, most people are too quick to believe themselves capable, expert, and perfectly capable intellectually to discriminate between the true and the false, between the straight path and the error. Hence, it would be better if it were possible to forbid everyone from reading the writings of mistaken people, so that those who might escape the danger of rejecting philosophy might also avoid accepting it. On the other hand, some of my readers have criticized some passages of my books dealing with the mysteries of religion. They have not studied the sciences sufficiently deeply, and their minds have not been able to embrace the full implications of our teachings. They believed that those passages were borrowed from the ancient philosophers. In fact, some of my expressions were the fruit of my own thinking. And why should the tracks of the one horse not cover those of another? Some of them can be found in the sacred texts. Many others are to be found in substance in the works of the mystics. But even if my words could be found nowhere but in the writings of ancient philosophers, why should they be dismissed? If they are acceptable, demonstrable, and in accord with the Quran and the traditions. If we were to open this door and begin to reject every truth that has already been discovered by a mistaken author, we would have to reject a great deal, including the Quranic verses, sayings of the Prophet, narratives of the ancients, and the sayings of the wise men and the mystics. It would be enough to argue that they had been quoted by the author of the Book of the Brethren of Purity, who used them as a basis for his argument and to deceive his stupid readers. Mistaken thinkers borrow from us authentic quotations and introduce them into their writings. Nevertheless, the least that one should require of a scholar is that he should be distinguishable from the ignorant common man. He knows that honey keeps its flavor, even if contained in the cup of one who lets blood. For he knows well that the substance of honey does not change according to its recipient. his natural revulsion is due to ignorance, to the fact that the cup is made to receive blood deemed impure. But it is not the cup that makes the blood dirty. The blood is already dirty. Honey is nothing of the sort and is not spoiled by being in a bloodletter's cup. Nevertheless, this sort of error is common. Most people will agree with a statement even if false, provided it is believed by someone they admire, whereas they reject it even if true when it comes from the mouth of people they do not like. This is equivalent to judging truth according to who speaks it, instead of judging people according to whether or not they speak the truth. That is enough about the danger of rejecting philosophy. The second one, the danger of accepting philosophy, is that one who studies books such as those of the Brethren of Purity and others sees that they are full of tasty bits taken from the sayings of the prophets and the maxims of the mystics. It is possible to appreciate and agree with them, but this would be tantamount to accepting the error of their teaching under the pretext of preserving the partial truth that it contains. Because of this danger, we have to forbid reading them. This essential precaution is like the prudence of keeping non-swimmers away from the sea and keeping children away from the snakes. A snake charmer should not manipulate snakes in the presence of his small child, who might want to imitate his father's actions, thinking he is like him. The child should be warned by the example of his father in not touching the snake in front of him. The scholar who is firm in knowledge should do the same. On the other hand, the expert snake charmer grabs hold of the snake, chooses between the venom and the antidote, extracts the antidote from the glands and overcomes the venom. He must not refuse the antidote to anyone who has need of it. In the same way, the observant money changer searches the bag of the forger and separates the pure gold from the counterfeits. He too must not refuse gold to anyone who asks him for it. Also, it is necessary to overcome the repugnance of a sick person for the antidote, which he knows to have been taken from a poisonous snake. It is also necessary to explain to a poor person who does not dare draw on the purse of the forger that he risks falling victim to his ignorance. He must be made to understand that truth and error do not contaminate each other, and above all that they do not change their meaning from the simple fact of being side by side. That is all I wish to say about the dangers which philosophy may present. This is the end of the part 3 from the book Deliverance from Error by Abu Hamid Al Ghazali, may Allah be pleased with him. In the next part, we'll be talking about the theology of the teaching, ta'alim. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.